Hey mom, how you doing?
Having a good day. A great start to the week. This pretty Monday morning, closing out our week or our month-long hiatus in Charleston and heading home this week for the holidays. So life is good in my area. How about you, Linz? How are you doing?
Life is good. Still recovering from my cold a little bit, but bouncing back and feeling a little bit more myself. I returned to society this weekend, so that was lovely after laying on the couch all week. So feeling good and doing good. But mom, I know this is going to be a little bit delayed for our listeners, but I couldn't start off this podcast that we're going to have about an incredibly important topic without mentioning how incredibly thankful I am for your health and that we're able to do this together. And your LinkedIn post this morning really reminded me how important it is for everyone to take a breath and take a step back from work and get some time away. So I just wanted to mention that to you. I'm incredibly thankful that you post that every year on the week anniversary of Thanksgiving, which is when we're recording this, to remind everyone of that incredibly important message.
Thanks, Linz. I appreciate that. That was probably one of the hardest weeks of my life, and self-induced. Like that's the bad part about this. So this is why this topic of mental health and just taking good care of yourself is incredibly important. For those of you that maybe aren't on LinkedIn or don't follow me, 4 years ago this Thanksgiving, I woke up in the middle of the night at my mother and father-in-law's house and had a heart attack. And I was 48 years old. And nobody expects at 48 years old. I was actually the picture of health. I was probably, the healthiest I had been. I was working out on a regular basis. I was doing all the things, but I also worked like a maniac, and I was in an incredibly stressful situation. I woke up and was dizzy. Like, it also wasn't the same symptoms that you think a heart attack would be, and I was crazy dizzy. And husband was like, "What the heck's the matter with you? Do you have vertigo? Do you have an ear infection? Like, what is the deal?" And I literally couldn't stand upright at all. Did have a heaviness in my chest, but I also have asthma. So honestly, it's not unusual for me to have a heaviness in my chest. When we called the doctor, she said you have to take your your blood pressure immediately, and I did, and it was in stroke range. And she said, "Go to the hospital immediately. Like, you are in trouble, and you need to be seen immediately." And the end of the day, we were shocked. It was a heart attack and several TIAs, but what was even more shocking was it was stress induced. It was not something that made, like, I don't have these issues today. I low blood pressure naturally. This was all stress induced, and it was situational stress induced. And and while you're in the throes of something, you think, I can just work my way through it. I can do things on my own. And I had people around me that were telling me, you need to get out of this situation. And for me, I just thought, that's crazy talk. I don't quit anything. I'm going to keep working my way through it. And I realized that was the wrong thing to do. Like, I actually self-induced this, which there were signs that I ignored. So leads me to, we've invited two people to talk about the importance of listening to your body, listening to the people around you, having an incredible community. So, Linz, I'm going to hand it over to you, and let's introduce our two guests and have them talk about why this topic is so important to them as well.
Yeah. Well, Justin Goodman and Brenden Corr are here to chat a bit about their new initiative. I don't even know if it's new. Honestly, I don't even know enough, remotely enough about this initiative that you guys are working on, Project 55. So, would love to have you guys introduce yourselves a little bit, and then let's dive into what Project 55 is all about. Justin, go ahead and kick us off.
Yeah, so my name is Justin Goodman. I've got a couple roles in the space. I am the CEO of Total CSR. I also had a retail agency that I sold a couple years ago to Assured Partners. And I'll just talk about why mental health is important, and then I'll pivot over to Brennan. Years ago, I went through a deeply personal struggle and The fact that I had people who were educated enough and cared enough to step in and tell me the truth and provide me the resources and the direction and the accountability necessary to make some real life changes is what saved my life. And over the course of my career, as I've led many teams, people, and done a lot of coaching, this mental health issue has continued to pop up and has gotten bigger and bigger since COVID. And so this issue has just always been on my heart. I personally obviously struggled through mental health stuff, but it is something that our industry is facing in just record numbers these days. Brenden, why don't you pop in next?
Yeah. Well, Brenden, Corr, and Carrie, Lindsay, it's so great to be here. And, Carrie, I guess I had no idea. So I'm so grateful that we get to share this podcast with you on such a full week, both with family and friends, but also as you celebrate kind of this new way of living and taking control of your health. It is important. And I'm sure there are plenty of people who will listen to this who have had a similar experience, or Lindsay, with your mom and your experience with all of that as well. But thank you for having us, first of all. And my current role is I'm the director of business development for Lost Run Pro. Justin and I connected. We did a mental health panel a number of years ago, kind of his brainchild, also with my own kind of previous experience through mental health, getting sober. Just last week celebrated my 5-year anniversary of being sober. So that's exciting. But that's how kind of we connected, which is the amazing part of the platform. It's, human connection and trying to drive change around mental health in the workplace. So again, thank you for giving us an opportunity to talk more about it.
Yeah,
Well, tell us how.
We're incredibly excited to have you guys here and learn more about Project 55. How was Project 55 founded and started? Was it on that panel or was it before?
B, you want to take it?
Go ahead, man. You're the boss.
All right. So what happened earlier in this year, and I had actually been working on a book for mental health specifically, and then the first quarter of this year, our industry lost a professional that was in my circle, but the outer circle due to his struggles with mental health, and it just really became to the forefront of my mind. And as the year progressed, and as just more and more situations kept popping up, I said, "This is something we've got to tackle, because if not us, I don't think anyone's going to jump on board." And so I had messaged a few of my friends, Brenden included, that were on this panel with me the year before. I said, "I want to do something. I have a rough plan of what I think we can do. Who's with me?" And the couple other people on the panel or on the message were like, "Hey, we're a little bit busy," but Brenden came back with an essay of, "I'm all in, let's go, when are we starting it?" And so it was really something where that energy he had gave me the courage to say, "Okay, we're going to go ahead and start developing this." And so it started out of just that experience, talking, working with others, but obviously having someone like Brenden who's like, "I'm all in on community." And some of these areas, Justin, where they may not be your skill sets, I bring a world of experience to the table. And so that's how these two knuckleheads got together and said, "Okay, we're going to do something different."
Love that. So Brenden, number one, congrats on 5 years. That's super incredible. And honestly, it takes a lot to put your story out there. So I appreciate that you're doing it. And I think it helps others when you're just as transparent as you are. So I get that you were on this panel, and it's incredibly sad that it takes the loss of someone or super tragic events in order to take action. But oftentimes that's what happens, right? So tell me, from the time you wrote that essay to now, what's transpired? Like, what is Project 55? If someone's never heard of it, how would you define Project 55, and what transpired from the moment you guys came together to now?
I guess I'll kind of handle the first part of that, and then I'll turn it over to Justin for what's coming down the pipe. But I think really our main mission, our tagline is educate, empower, and equip. And so our number one thing is, how do we get people within our communities? Obviously, we both work, and you guys, within the insurance world, so that's kind of where we're starting. But how do we get everybody access to mental health information, tools? So you can go to project55.org. Everything's up and running. Official launch date is actually January 1st, but what we have now is live. But it's kind of, we're still kind of learning and building as we're growing, because people can provide feedback. But then you can actually join the community. And within that community, you can sign up. Is the ability for you to learn about all of the different types of mental health issues that people face in the day-to-day life, right? Addiction, anxiety, depression, bipolar, eating disorders. So we can learn about that. Podcasts, books, and the reason we're doing that is because what we found is that outside of the top 100 insurance companies and carriers, very few have access to any information. It's not a part of the training manuals. It's not part of the discussion. It's not part of the onboarding. And when we think about that, like, let's just take the number of 42,000 insurance agencies in the country. So that means 41,000, 900 of them don't have resources. And then when we think about that even further, is that 48,000 of those have probably less than 20 people in the agency. So when someone's struggling, where do they look? Where do they turn? In most cases, that's the owner, it's HR, an office manager, who in most cases isn't equipped themselves to deal with an issue and or have the background, the information. So Project 55 is designed to help get those people the resources, the information. Then beyond that, one of the things we know is that mental health is deeply personal. And in a lot of cases, people want to maybe not talk to their employer or their leader about a struggle. So we have a community platform internally where you can go connect with others who are struggling, who have a success story. And so you can actually kind of, well, I'll call crowdsource. If you have, hey, I have an employee who's been drinking on the job site, but I don't know how to talk to them. Do I give them 2 warnings? Do I give them 3? What's the best way to get them? And other owners could potentially chime in. Or I have a son who's bipolar. I need help. What are great resources? That's what we have currently, and that's what people can really access. And that's kind of to help just lay the groundwork. Then what we're building currently is really where Justin, this is probably like our kind of step 3, or, kind of third component, is really kind of the bread and butter of what the whole thing will be built around.
Yeah, so with Project 55, the name actually comes after 55% of the people struggling with mental health aren't getting the treatment they need, right? So they get it because of lack of resources, stigma, a combination of the both. And even, I would argue, within the top 100 agencies, they have resources, but they're not being used. If you talk to those companies, there's a number of reasons why that they aren't being used. But we wanted to obviously first have that online community where you could get accurate information. The other part to that equation is, most of us, when we see someone struggle, don't know what to do. When someone loses a loved one, is going through a rough time, we don't know how to engage. And it's a real big difficulty, because right now, if you're struggling with mental health and you need to go see a counselor, you're going to wait 4 to 6 months to get in. So by the time you get in, you're so far down and in just a negative place that it's very difficult to recover with any sort of pace. And so what we're working on, and what we're deep in the woods on, is an actual training for leaders, coworkers, etc., to hold that space and properly assist those people that are in need. So there's a space in between counselor and just a passerby. And so we're calling it a mental health first responder training. Our whole objective with this training is to not only educate people on a deeper level about what the different struggles people have are, but to also frame it with the ability to understand from a, let's say, an empathetic response. You've got 15 different common scenarios. Someone goes through a divorce. They have all sorts of things going through their head. Sometimes they just need someone else to acknowledge what they're feeling, seeing, hearing, going through. And if we've never been through that, it's very hard to understand what that is. So we educate there as well. But past that, we want to equip individuals to step in, not just with the resources of saying, hey, here's where you can go for information, but let's say someone, for example, is struggling. Janie on your team gets a call from a client who sounds angry on the phone, and the client is like, Janie, we got a problem. I need you to call me. And she is now ruminating on this and catastrophizing this. Well, she's struggling and she was already struggling before that. Well, wouldn't it be great as a leader within the organization to be able to say, hey, let's talk through this. Let's work through this scenario. And by the way, I've got a worksheet that can help you go step by step through this process and work through this anxiety. And so we are going to be building detailed coursework that not only educates but equips you to step in those situations and also identify where it's appropriate to refer them to other resources. And most importantly, when we believe self-harm is a likelihood, right? Well, let me one step back. There's a lot of misnomers about the likelihood of self-harm, and if we talk about it, if it increases, decreases in likelihood, we are going to go through all of those. We're going to educate on what the real warning signs are and how to make that judgment call, and then to immediately direct them to those resources and stand by them through that, and what the follow-up process looks like through their recovery. Past that, we believe there's a different way that insurance organizations and really businesses should onboard for mental health. Right now, it's a line item in your onboarding checklist. What happens then is it doesn't get utilized. So at the end of this coursework, we are going to go through how we think organizations should onboard for mental health in a way that is going to create consistency and remove stigma, but also improve the usage of that agency's own services that they're providing for their team members. So all this is going to be in a 6-hour course that's available to anyone. So long story short, through my company, because I've been in the learning space, Total CSR, we will have it native for all of our customers. But there are people who will never use me, etc., and we wanted to make it available to them as well. So through Project 55, they will have direct access. They just put first name, last name, email, boom, they've got the 6-hour course. And our ultimate goal with this is to get it to as many agencies and insurance company people as possible, because the greatest network that I know in the business world is the insurance community. And if you can imagine the next phase where we said, we just trained an entire industry on how to step in, and now go to all of your customers. You have 500 businesses, let's offer it to free for them as well. So now we can use the agencies as distribution networks for further mental health training. So that's a lot of verbal vomit there, but that's the direction where we're going. And that program specifically hopefully will launch by end of April.
So you've said a couple things. The one that keeps ruminating in my head as you're talking is the stigma. There's just this unknown. I think when people have not walked in someone's shoes, you just don't understand. And therefore, it's not something that's discussed. Becomes this taboo topic when people need you the most in actually incites the actual opposite response. So it is, I think that's one of the most powerful things, is taking the stigma away, allowing a space where if you are walking in this on this path, or you are in this situation, giving a place where others can come together and share their stories, share their success. Actually, one of the reasons we started this podcast, believe it or not, like not a lot of agents talk about buying and selling in a real way. I think they're the only ones that have gone through certain challenges when they're doing it. I realize it's a different topic, but same concept. Like, let's actually bring some of these stories to light and make it not that it's an unusual thing. 55% of people who suffer with this do not get the care that they need. That's mind-boggling. And I don't know the statistic of the number of people that struggle with some kind of mental health that you would put under your umbrella, but I would assume it's far greater than that, correct?
So in any given year, well, let's talk COVID. I think it's 26% during COVID of teenagers had suicidal ideation.
Yeah, crazy. Crazy.
The data on adults, it kind of ebbs and flows over time. Economics plays into it, but you can rest assured that almost 90% of the population has had at least one depressive episode over the past 25 to 40 months.
Crazy. It's getting it to our family. So I have two daughters. My oldest daughter has high functioning autism, and that has an entire realm of actually, if you've met one person with autism, you've met one person with autism. So I don't want to suggest that her situation is like anyone else, but it's a learning curve, and it's a learning curve as she moves through life and the community we've been brought into. But prior to having a daughter that had this challenge, I knew nothing about it. And that's the way we all move through life. Like, I didn't know anything about what it's like to lose a parent until I lost a parent. I didn't know anything about what it was like to have a heart attack until you have a heart attack. By creating a space where it's safe to talk about this with other people, man, it's pretty powerful. You might prevent someone from getting to a place that they shouldn't get to, that's an incredible thing, but it's not the easiest thing in the world to do, I would also say, right?
Yeah, and it's something that the danger is we can do harm. And so if you haven't properly been trained, or you think you have been trained too much, like for example, one of the things we'll make clear in our coursework is we are not training you to be a lay counselor. That is many more hours of training and requires in-person interactivity work that is not in the scope. And so do not go and start diagnosing people. Do not go and then create treatment plans for these individuals. You're there to receive them, support them, direct them to the appropriate resources, and assist them where practical.
Yeah, and I'll even add a little additional context in the sense that, like, if we start talking about it a little bit more openly, and when people are struggling and those that have a situation arise, so Carrie, you and I are working together, don't know much about autism other than what I've read. It's not in my circle. If we are able to talk about that within the workplace, and then you come to me, well, maybe I'm at least equipped enough to know that, hey, Carrie, actually, who I think you should talk to about this is Justin, because I know that Justin has a family member. He's far more, engaging in that type of conversation within the workplace, because while I might not do harm, I might not also be the most adept person for that type of conversation in the workplace who can be the most supportive a time of need. And it's not to say, again, that I would do the harm, and any listening is better than none, and any conversation is in most cases. But by talking about it and breaking down that stigma, having kind of a level playing field, knowing that it's okay to have these conversations, also maybe have a better understanding of our coworkers and where they might fit in different scenarios.
I think something about what you said, Justin, I keep thinking about and it's sticking with me is when a staff member's on a call with a customer who's upset, which we all experience in any industry that you're in, and you can't get to your direct manager to talk about it, and it's circulating in your head, you're spiraling about it a little bit. In rooms, I feel like the trendy topic right now to talk about is bringing in the hostage negotiators to kind of break down that cycle. I don't know if you guys have heard that, but I feel like that continuously has been coming up. And I always thought that was aggressive. I think it would be incredibly cool to sit in and listen to them and learn from them from that. But as a young female who does get yelled at a lot in their job, yes, hello, that seems aggressive as the approach. I love the idea that you guys will have tools like a worksheet or a workshop or something to be able to help staff navigate that, because I think that's a generational difference that we're approaching in the workplace. Like the older generations, that was just part of it and you just dealt with it and you moved on. But the younger generations, and I'll even let myself in with it, I tend on calls like that to say, hey, this is no longer a what's the word I'm looking for? Of course I'm going to forget.
Diff.
Yes, that's the word I'm looking for. It's no longer a productive conversation. Why don't I give you a call back in 30 minutes, or why don't I give you a call back in 2 days, or something like that, depending on the severity? Which I think someone in the older generation, if they heard me say that, they'd be like, no, we're already on the call. Let's figure it out. Where I'm like, no, let's take a step back. I'm no longer engaging in this. I think having tools for that, for training up front, because it took me a long time to get there, right? I had to stumble through it my first couple times. I had to really work through getting comfortable saying that to someone. Being able to train someone on that as they're entering your agency or your company is really important in that early stage.
Lindsay, I wanted to just jump in right there. I want to say this in case there's any other the female listeners on here. I don't think there's ever a reason that a customer should be yelling at anyone, right? And so I have both physical and verbal boundaries with people. And there's a guy I follow, Jefferson Fisher. Are you familiar with him at all?
Mm-mm.
So big follow on Instagram. He's a litigator, but he's got great responses to very difficult people. And a great line to use in this scenario is, the way you're talking to me is beneath me. I'm going to give the opportunity to you to say that differently. And what you do there is, one, it puts them back on their heels, and they have to choose in that moment. Are they going to engage differently? The other part is, who has the power when you're giving permission? It's you who has the power and the control. They no longer have that, and you're making them aware of that.
Hmm.
What I have found is, while it's a very direct approach, sometimes people just need that aha moment and they will back down, apologize. And if they wouldn't, then I would dismiss them. But I would just say, for anyone listening, this guy, Jefferson Fisher, has about 100 of these that are absolutely genius. And he's on Instagram all over the place.
Nice.
But yes, having those type of tools when someone's dealing with a difficult situation, or even, I lost an account and now I'm spiraling about all the consequences that could happen to me and the agency, and working through those. So it's very important that these tools that are readily available, that if we give a little bit of training to a layperson, they can help walk that person through, and it makes a marked difference in outcome.
Justin, Justin, the guy that you're talking about, is he the one that says, try that and follow me? Does he end them all like that? Yeah, I know exactly who you mean. Sorry about that. I know his name, but I agree. He gives unbelievable advice, and it's simple, but incredibly powerful. So I would agree with you 1,000%. Sorry, Brenden, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
Good. No, it's great. I mean, he's a wonderful follow, and just like, it's these quick, like 1 minute videos where you're just like, oh my God, it seems so simple when he says it, but it's so powerful. So, but the other thing also from this is that, like, human beings, we take things a lot of people take things so personally. So, Lindsay, in that conversation, that inevitably has happened to you, as you were saying, like, told you maybe, you take all of that, you don't say anything, you hang up, you ruminate over it, and then you go home and your interactions are different too, right? And then you're stressed out at night. So then, are you eating differently? You're sleeping differently. Did you miss your workout, right? Like, did you engage with your kids differently? And so, all of this stuff that we're hoping to do and lay the groundwork and the foundation is how do we change that type of conversation? Because if you go home and you ruminate over that, then you also maybe wake up the next morning, you're still stressed, you're still anxious, and then you come in a different mood, right? So then you're engaging with your employees or your coworkers in a different way. So if we can start to just kind of nip those in the bud a little bit, like, and again, Undoubtedly, not every conversation is going to go perfect, but if we can have a way to teach people how to kind of reassess, leave things, and then they go home and those conversations are different even after losing a client, changes the way that they engage with their family members, their kids, they work out, and again, all of those things, because it really is, it ends up being this big cycle. And then we show up the next day in a totally different light and a different attitude. And the conversation, maybe with that customer again, is completely different that second day.
The other thing is, I think you use 40, and I know it to be 39,000 independent insurance agents across the country don't have training on much more than coverage and relationships and insurance and their community. They are incredible people, but it is not like there's this book that's handed to someone to say, hey, here's how you effectively lead people. Here's how you deal with everything that comes up in their life. Here's how you deal with your finances. Here's how, there's so many things as the agency owner that you've got to figure out. And this is probably one of the most impactful things. Your people are your biggest asset, and it's the largest expense, it's the biggest asset, and it is the heart and soul of your agency. We should be giving them resources to be able to relate to the people that are so incredibly important to their agency, their customers, and their community. So, a little shocked that this hasn't already been done, to be quite honest with you, now that I'm thinking about it in a different way, right?
Yeah, I would add there's another organization out there called Mental Health First Aid that has been around for a long time. They take a little bit of a different approach, which is why we're building ours a certain way. And there are some great people over at that organization. They do things, and I would say to people, if you need the training right now, and you can't wait till April for it, it's still a great resource. I think the devil's always in the details. Is you're trying to find training, you're trying to find this information, but there's actually a vast amount of it, so you're trying to sift through all of it. And so that's what we're trying to do is, look, I don't care if it's our training, somebody else's training. Let's get you options that don't cost anything so that you can actually go out there and be effective and, more importantly, take care of your own self first.
Yeah. So
It's pretty
how
it's
do
pretty
people
unique in that also, just to clarify for the listeners, everything that we're building is completely free. So we didn't say that at the beginning, but it is 100% free. We aren't asking for any money. It will be, the whole idea is that this can be distributed to an agency owner, a high school kid. You could take it home and have your kids go through it, right? It is completely free because changing the conversation at the workplace is step one, kind of as Justin alluded to earlier. And then it's like 39,000, 42,000, whatever that number is, the distribution network of all of those to their families, to the other companies. Resources is what we're trying to get to the people.
What has been your response? Because I've seen it probably over the last 2 or 3 months that you started talking about this. At least it feels that way. I'm not 100% sure. I didn't mark my calendar, but what's been the response so far from people inside the industry? How are people getting involved?
So I'd say the response has been great. I think there's a lot of people who are very hungry to, well, let me give you two camps. Camp one is, I've gone through something. I resonate deeply with this. I want to find a way to give back. So how can I get involved? So there's that camp. There's the other camp who's actively struggling and saying, I wish there were these resources. Where can I go? And maybe there's a third camp as well, is the insurtechs, the agency management systems, the user groups behind them. All of them have said, we're all in. Just let us know when you're launching and we're going to start pushing out the message, and we'll get this out there. So I think there's a tremendous groundswell of support. Nobody has come out and said, oh, we shouldn't be talking about it. In fact, it's the opposite. This is great. How quickly can it come? And it's really been a matter of we need a little bit of patience because we've got to make sure we do this right and that we actually execute on what we're promising.
That's awesome. It's not shocking though,
So if
but
people,
it's
yeah, no.
fantastic. I can't believe, um, well, I can believe it hasn't been done, but it's such an incredible need. And it's in fact that the average independent insurance agency owner, just so you know, like are my thing. So these 39,000 independent insurance agencies in the country, 83% are under 1.25 million. And then 50% of those are 500 and below. I mean, we're talking really, really small organizations that don't have a lot of resources and don't have a lot of time. The fact that it's free, thank you. Like big time. Thank you for doing that because it's, it's it's hard to have resources for all the things you need. And I'm not saying that agency owner would prioritize something else over this, but you're not even making them make that decision, which is awesome because it's difficult. Getting these resources is incredibly important. And I love that this is an industry full of people that care about relationships and care about people. So it fits that. I think you'll have an unbelievable adoption rate once it's out there. I truly do.
If
Also
people
love that
want
you're
to get
changing.
involved,
Say again, Linz.
if people want to get involved and want to start changing this aspect of their agency, just to wrap up, this is a little bit longer episode than we normally do. So thanks for sticking around if you're still here listening. I know we've said a couple of resources in the link throughout this episode, but would you guys just say it for me again? And I'll make sure to put it in the show notes for anyone who's wants to just click on it as well.
You can follow us. Project50.org is the website. And then within there, you can kind of join the actual community. So you can sign up, again, completely free. And then within the community is where you can access the actual resources and interact and engage with other people. And where then when the launch for the training comes, we will have that, available to all of our members in there. Then, of course, we're on LinkedIn, we're on Facebook, we're on all of those things. So you can find us anywhere, through the social media channels, or Justin and I on LinkedIn as well. So, but very much appreciate you two and taking a few minutes to learn about Project 55, but then of course why it matters to you guys. And Carrie, for such a great week. I'm so blessed to you, and I'm so glad that you're here and we're able to at least share in this today. So hey, I'm so grateful. Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you
absolutely. Well,
guys.
thank you, Brenden, and thank you, Justin, for coming and sharing this and for doing this for the industry. You've had huge supporters in us, and we will be watching and participating in every way we possibly can.
Thank you.
Right.